Almost. Major. Holy fucking shit, this is major! Welcome to Almost Major, a podcast where we talk about the many major studios and the films they released. We are still on Artisan, and we are still on comedies that nobody remembers. My name is Kevin Tudor. I'm here with Bryden Doyle.
Hello.
And Charlie Nash.
Hey.
And joining us again is Michael Snydel.
Hello. I'm here to talk about Boat Trip.
Yeah, we were all forced to be on here. No, Boat Trip 2003 is what we're talking about today. It's a Morton Nathan joint. It came out March 21st, 2003.
Spike Lee and Mort Nathan, the two directors that are allowed to have joints after their film.
Yeah. Mort. Do his friends call him? Never mind.
I don't know. Mort Ramey was a character in Secret Window.
Charlie, Charlie, use the voice. Be like, you stole my story.
You stole my story.
Is it John Turturro?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Directed by David Koepp,
yes!
an Almost Major alum.
Yes!
Yeah.
What the fuck is I going to say? Oh, I saw two different reports that said Boat Trip's budget was $15 million. I saw one that said $20 million, so somewhere around there.
It is one of the most it's one of the most unsolved mysteries known to man is how much
yeah.
Boat Trip.
How much did they spend on Boat Trip? It's like, well, 15, 20, who cares? You didn't make it back. Opening weekend, it made $3.8 million at 1,714 theaters, where it came in at number 10. The top 5 that week of March 21st was Bringing Down the House, Dreamcatcher, which I've been needing to watch.
Oh,
I've been thinking about it.
Yeah, I watched, I watched some alien weird movie, and I was just like, I think Dreamcatcher is the next logical step.
Oh, Dreamcatcher it's something else. It's also made by truly talented people.
Also in the top 5, Agent Cody Banks, View from the Top, and The Hunted, William Friedkin's The Hunted.
Okay. The Hunted fucking rules. That movie's good.
Does it?
Yeah.
Hell
It's
yeah.
great. That's a genuinely good movie.
I don't think it rules, but I did see Agent Cody Banks in theaters.
I saw Agent Cody Banks' Destination London in theaters.
I didn't see the second one, but if I recall correctly, doesn't Hilary Duff shove an ice cube full of nanobots into Ian McShane's mouth, and that eats him from the
That's the first
inside?
film.
And that's in a PG-rated movie for children.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also remember there's a guy who gets thrown into he gets knocked off a balcony and it falls into an explosion, but then he comes back and a line that my brothers would quote would be like, "You messed up my haircut!" He's yelled. I remember that was something my older brothers thought was funny.
Goodness. Yeah, Agent Cody Banks, number 3 at the box office, Better Times. View from the Top, Mike Myers is in that movie. Gwyneth Paltrow, just a movie that doesn't exist.
One of
Ruffalo?
the few fresh reviews on Rotten Tomatoes said, in an age where the Gwyneth Paltrow catastrophe View from the Top came out the same week, it's good to know that this is what comedies are. I'm not
Hell
kidding.
yeah.
I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but there is a Rotten Tomatoes review that is slamming View from the Top and then praising Boat Trip. Anyway.
Who would dare say that?
Domestically, Boat Trip brought in $8.5 million, and overall it got $14.9 million. This is directed and written by Mort Nathan. First film. Also directed the sequel to Van Wilder, The Rise of Taj. Prior to this, he was a producer and writer on The Golden Girls for several years, and was a writer on Kingpin in 1996. After this, he writes and directs National Lampoon's Bag Boy from 2007.
Yikes.
Also co-written by William Bigelow. Really, the only other credit he has is a movie called Frozen with Fear in 2001, which stars Bo Derek.
Who is the editor on Boat Trip? That's what I would really like to know.
It says by committee. No.
John Axness, whose second most popular credit for editing on Letterboxd is Van Wilder, The Rise of Taj. So
oh my god.
He was super tight with Mort Nathan, I guess.
Yeah, him and Mort go way back.
there's like a brief article that like was written by Variety about like Artisan booking the distribution rights for Boat Trip. It was originally scheduled for a wide release in January, came out in March. Seems like January was like a more fitting spot, I would say. And I just think it's funny that they talk about like how it reunites screenwriter Mort Nathan in his directorial debut. I'm quoting now, with MPCA, Motion Picture Corporation of America, chair and producer Brad Crevoy. And it says, Crevoy called Artisan a company that knows how to market high-concept movies, singling out the mini major for praise on picks such as The Blair Witch Project and National Lampoon's Van Wilder, and added that he felt confident they will achieve the same success here. And that did not come true. This movie, it's really funny that, like, you know, they're viewing Van Wilder as a success, which, you know, it's true. That movie was financially successful, but it was in theaters for less time than Boat Trip. It was in theaters. Van Wilder was in theaters for only 37 days, and Boat Trip was in theaters for 44 days, which is weird when you think about how Boat Trip made significantly less money.
Significantly less, and it barely cracked the top 10 its first weekend. So
everyone was rushing out to see Dreamcatcher. I mean, that's
bring it down the house. I was in theaters to see that.
I did see that in theaters as well.
I saw it on DVD and I saw it on cable more than once, and oh boy, does that movie probably age like milk. I am totally terrified to ever watch that ever again.
Yeah.
Eugene Levy saying, "You got me straight tripping, boo." It will live in my mind for all time.
Well, the weird thing about that movie is that, like, Steve Martin and Queen Latifah are the leads, and it's like not a romantic comedy, but kind of, and then it ends up being Queen Latifah and Eugene Levy, who are like, it's just very bizarre.
It's like, look at this unlikely couple, they could never be together, and then by the end they're just like we said, this unlikely couple that could never be together.
The other thing
with zero chemistry.
Zero chemistry. I mean, Steve Martin and Queen Latifah have zero chemistry, but they have even less. The only other things I remember about that movie are Queen Latifah fighting Missy Pyle in a bathroom, and that's awful.
Set to
Simply Irresistible.
Simply Irresistible.
Oh
my
god.
Yeah.
And there's a rich old white lady with a pug who she has named William Shakespeare, who wears a collar, if I'm not...
You remember
That's
more than me.
Oh, I saw this movie a couple times as a 12-year-old. I was a dumb 12-year-old.
I mean, yeah, at the time I was just like, this movie's amazing, and then Bruce Almighty came out like 2 months later, and I was like, never mind. Bruce Almighty's fucking phenomenal. Yeah.
How does Bruce Almighty age? I thought Bruce Almighty was fun at the time.
It's certainly better than Bringing Down the House, which I'm sure is just unwatchable these days.
There's a really bad Hispanic stereotype I do remember from the one who the monkey goes up his butt. Like, that is...
Oh my god, I totally...
That's a Bruce Almighty, right?
Bruce Almighty,
Yeah.
not Evan.
Oh, I saw Evan multiple times as a kid.
Oh, dear.
I have not. Boat Trip starring Cuba Gooding Jr. as Jerry Robinson. Prior to this, of course, he was in Boys in the Hood in 1992, won an Oscar for Jerry Maguire in 1996.
Show me the money is what he said to get into this movie.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I think the Ben Affleck movie Paycheck, that should be actually this movie's title. And Snow Dogs in 2002.
Paycheck is better.
I haven't seen Paycheck, but that's John Woo. I assume it's better than
it's not that interesting, but yeah, it's better.
Snow Dogs in 2002, which I do remember when that came out. Everybody was like, the dogs don't even talk. It's only in the TV spot.
No, it's in the dream. There's a dream sequence where they talk.
Oh, God. They did a
So it's like a
Kangaroo
Kangaroo
Jack. Oh, man.
I saw that one in
Fucking
theaters,
swindled
too.
by that. Of course. After this, he's in... well, not after this, but in the same year, he's in Radio. And Daddy Day Camp in 2007. It's pretty much been... fallen downhill since Radio and Daddy Day Camp, honestly.
There's like a little bit of like a resurgence, I think, in
American
like the
Gangster.
2010s.
Also.
Well, yeah, he starts taking on like character parts. Like he's in The Butler, the Lee Daniels movie
yeah.
in 2013. And then I think a really big part of it too is he's very good in the People vs. O.J. Simpson.
Yes,
Ryan
he
Murphy
is.
directed miniseries, which he's really good in. I think his career. This is like a thing we need to talk about. His career has been derailed.
I'm gonna. Yeah.
Do you want to talk? Would you want to talk right now, or do you want to get to it later?
Well, I have it right here. It has been accused by at least 30 women of sexual misconduct, has been formally charged on 3 accounts, and has a trial starting this month. So,
Did you say at least 30 women?
at least 30.
I have the stats here.
I texted you all that I was watching this and mentioned that Horatio Sands was canceled, which you also
I have that as well.
And then Bryden mentioned that Cuba Gooding was canceled, and I was like, wait, I didn't hear about this at all. Yeah. And then you sent me an article, and then, I relayed that information to Michael. So, like, it's weird that it has been reported, but not widely enough for us to all know.
Well, it's like still going on. Like, here's the thing with the Gooding Jr. thing is like, so it's 3 cases of groping, and like, there's like 19 other accusers whom prosecutors were seeking to call as witnesses. This is from the Associated Press or ABC News. But then in addition to that, there's also a rape lawsuit from 2013. And I think with the groping thing, it was COVID. Like, he was supposed to go to trial in like April 2020, but then COVID kind of like shut down a lot of court matters. So it's kind of like still like they're still trying to get around to it.
Right. Because I saw that he was supposed to have a trial date February 1st of this year, but then I Googled and I haven't seen anything about that. So it probably got pushed back.
I know it's crass to bring up Degree. I knew that he was canceled. I knew that he was accused of things. Still makes it a very different conversation knowing it's 30 women.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Wow. Horatio Sands plays Nick Ragoni prior to this, but also after this. He's an SNL cast member from 1998 to 2006. He's in Tomcats in 2001 and Road Trip in 2000. He also plays, I believe his character's title in Bachelorette is Barely Attractive Guy. Because he's on the plane talking to, or Lizzie Kaplan's talking to him. And
that movie's great, though. I've been on record of this pod saying that movie's great. And at least he's only in that segment, and at least Lizzie Kaplan gives him shit. So
right. Because I was just like the entire time, I was like, is that a Horatio Sands? Pops up in small roles in television shows and movies afterwards. Has been accused of sexual assault last year. So, yeah. Rosalind Sanchez is Gabriella. Prior to this, she was in Rush Hour 2. After this is a regular on Without a Trace from 2005 to 2006. Vivica A. Fox is Felicia. Prior to this, lots of television, making her first big film role in Independence Day in 1996, also Set It Off in 96, Soul Food 97, and of course Tries to Kill Satan in Idle Hands in 1999.
Yeah.
After this, she's in Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2, and since 2016, she has been in 25 Lifetime films, all with the title The Wrong Blank. Like The Wrong Man, The Wrong Valentine.
That is amazing. Okay.
25.
So that's a new podcast you guys are doing?
God damn, dude. In the 2010s, she has like averaged like 15 movies a year. Like, she works. But yeah, the 25 Lifetime movies, all like The Wrong Man, The Wrong Boat, The Wrong Valentine, The Wrong this, like, and like.
No Hallmark in there? She's not double dipping?
I don't know. I didn't see Christmas when I was going through. You know, that's the easy way. But The Wrong, I was like, oh, this is either Lifetime or ID Channel. But trivia, there's not much trivia. But Sir Roger Moore did this movie for the money and for a free vacation. I mean, sure. This was filmed in 2001 and was not released until 2003. Will Ferrell and Artie Lang were supposed to kiss in their scene, but Lang refused to do it. And if you know anything about Artie Lang, that's not very surprising.
Did anyone know Will Ferrell was in this movie before they put it on?
No.
I did not.
No.
This
is the same year as Old School, which I feel like that's like kind of a big breakout for like Will Ferrell as like a comedic lead.
And I feel like this, when was this before or after? They were the same year, but I feel like it was like mere weeks apart or something.
Of what, Old School?
What, Old School and both?
Yeah, I feel like.
Let's look.
I mean, not like it's of dire importance or anything. It's just like something that I couldn't help but think of.
Yeah, Boat Trip came out in March and Old School came out in February. So actually it came out before Boat Trip. So yeah.
That's so weird. Yeah. So weird.
Huh.
Yeah.
It's the 7-day, 6-night fun in the sound singles package.
Sex.
We'll take it.
But on this cruise,
a boat filled with hot, beautiful women!
their ship out of luck.
It's a gay cruise, Jerry. What?
Now,
I'm swimming back to shore!
just when their vacation was sunk.
Are you okay?
I'm fine!
Their love boat
There's a small craft off the starboard bow that's trying to get our attention.
is about to come in.
God!
To get the girls
Maybe I can even find a gay guy and he can do me the favor.
Me? Straight? Girlfriend, please.
they'll have to become one of the boys.
Sign me up!
Starring Cuba Gooding Jr.
Want to get back together?
Well, I did, before I found out that you were,
How could you think I'm gay?
Boat Trip.
Initial thoughts about Boat Trip. Has anybody here seen it prior to watching for this pod? No. Okay.
I think my mom maybe had seen it. I think I remember her, like, it was on TV once. She said, like, oh, Boat Trip, maybe we should watch that. And then she realized it was, like, not appropriate for, like, a 7-year-old. And then decided
For a second, I thought you were going to say that she realized it was about gay people or something.
She was like, wait a minute, I forgot about this. I think Brian's mom is the only person to go, oh, Boat Trip. You know. Yay! Boat Trip. And we were all just like, Boat Trip, yay. It was like 9 p.m. when I watched this movie, and I was just like, I would much rather go to bed right now. But initial thoughts, I really don't have anything to say other than this movie is just fucking terrible. Like, I almost wish it was more offensive than I would actually have in a reaction. But I was just like, yeah, they're gay, but they're straight. Yay, okay, yeah, okay. But yeah, my initial thoughts, I have nothing to say, and I'm sure everybody else does. But it happened. I watched it and I enjoyed none of it. Yeah. So Charlie.
I mean, yeah, like I knew about this film because it was an infamous flop. It's kind of like Van Wilder, where I'm like, yeah, this is what I was expecting. Michael and I were talking about it, and like Michael warned me beforehand, like if anything, it's not as homophobic as it is misogynistic, which I wholeheartedly agree with. And I found, like, again, I mentioned on the Van Wilder episode that, like, if I saw this when I was a teenager during the time of its release or like shortly thereafter, I'm sure it would have, like, I would have been like far more negative about it in different ways. And here I'm kind of like it's so dated even for 2003 that it's just like boring. Kevin, you mentioned, like, if it was more offensive, it would have, like, at least gotten a reaction out of me. And that's kind of how the way I feel about it, where I'm just like, I'm not offended by this thing. I'm just like bored and expected this sort of stuff. And there are certain things, like, kind of surprised they never used the F slur, which we talked about. I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry, a PG-13 film that came out 4 years later in the previous episode, and somehow, like, that was fine for that. And like that's a bizarre silver lining, but like it's just so lame. Like, kind of like Van Wilder, where I'm just kind of like, these are hitting the exact beats I expect them to. And then, if anything, like, at least, even though the gay men are kind of like used as backdrops and used to define the heterosexual male character's perspective on queerness in a way that ultimately is like about their understanding of otherness, it's still about how Nathan Rabin writes about this, like how heterosexuality is the norm, and as a result of that, all of the women in this movie come off as horrible misogynistic tropes, which is kind of what like either they're resentful exes or a new love interest that was wronged by men, and that's their whole interest, and they just happen to be a dance instructor, or they're a queer-coded, at least initially queer-coded, like coach for a swimsuit model for swimsuit models that then becomes this weird assaulty type of thing. There's lots of the other thing that's, like, I think most upsetting about both these movies that we've recently covered is, like, assault was considered to be funny back then in a way that is just not okay then, and is certainly, like, it just shockingly, like, abhorrent, like that it's just shockingly abhorrent that, like, this was ever okay, but it's so prevalent in so many mainstream comedies. And like, I mean, it's just the occasional, just the gay jokes are just tired. Like, how do you not know the words to "I Will Survive"? How do you? Oh, the God, they always play Liza Minnelli on this boat. Like that type of stuff where it's like they're not even creative. And like, if I saw this movie when I was in the closet in the mid to early aughts, I'm sure I would have been like upset by it, and I was certainly fascinated by. I'm sure.
Do you think you would find it as like morsels of gay culture if you saw this that early as a counterpoint to some of these, to something like Van Wilder?
Oh, here's the thing: is that when I was a kid and didn't know how to like just analyze films, I think as a 31-year-old came in, no, Van Wilder's way more offensive and way worse. I'm just saying that, like, if I saw this when I was a teenager, which I guess I shouldn't be talking about it from this perspective, but I'm just thinking about it at the time of its release. Like, I'm sure this would have, like, upset me more than Van Wilder, while now growing out of that phase and being like, whatever, I can roll my eyes at this. Like, Van Wilder's a much more abhorrent movie, and I wasn't offended by this as a 31, like, watching it in the year 2022 now. I was just kind of like occasionally like, oh wait, that scene is like so wrong that it's like funny in an almost like anti-comedy way. And then there were other scenes where I was just kind of like, all right, this is just lazy shit. So I'll get more in depth.
Right. Bryden?
Yeah. I can't remember the adjective you used, but like talking about like some of the gags, there are like gags that like, but like you're talking about like how like it's like everything you expect, I guess, with these gags. It's like, I don't know if I expected the trajectory of every gag in this movie, because some of them are like truly like brain melting. Like I don't know what screenwriters were smoking in the early 2000s to think like, okay, yeah, we'll have a scene start out like where she's showing how to like perform oral sex on a banana, because you know, as you do, and then we'll cut to someone masturbating in a bathroom, but they're not doing it into a toilet. They're doing it out the porthole, and they're not using their hands. And then I don't know, how do we end this scene? Their jizz lands on someone's face below, and then the punchline is they think that the person who's standing next to them and not even facing them, that's who
with
did it.
Pants
like,
on.
I'm thinking none of that makes any sense. But like people are just like watching, like yeah, okay, sure. We'll all sign off on this.
I said some jokes broke my like that is one of the few jokes that I was just like, I can't believe like that.
I could not believe it.
Wait a minute, I know where this is going. I knew it. Like, nobody could. Yeah. Nobody could.
Yeah. I think this movie's terrible, but it's like that's not a new take. But what's interesting about this movie, I guess, is it does sort of seem like a movie that's like thinks it's progressive, perhaps, and thinking like, oh, you know, it turns like, I mean, the whole arc of like Horatio Sands' character is thinking like, oh, you know, the guys who are gay that I play poker with, it turns out that you know, they're doctors and lawyers and everything, so like they're cool people too and everything. And it's like saying, I feel like you could have just like learned that lesson privately and everything. You didn't need to make an entire movie about that. But then like what's also problematic too, I think, is like it's like trying to like, it's maybe like the movie screenwriters are like patting themselves on the back for thinking like we're showing like gay people as people, but it's like showing them as like a monolith and everything, of like showing it's like not only is it like these straight characters have like a very rigid idea of how gay people are, but also the gay characters are shown having a rigid idea of who they are.
Yes.
Like where it's the gay character says, you're pretending to be gay and you don't know the words to "I will survive" and everything. Like as if like that, I imagine that would be like kind of,
if you put a gun to my head and said sing "I Will Survive" word for word with no karaoke to help me out, I would my brains would be all over the floor. Like it would just be terrible.
I will.
Yeah, but I imagine that would be troublesome. Or I don't know if Boat Trip had like a big impact on anyone, but like I imagine that could be troubling to someone who is like coming to terms with their sexual identity. It's like as if like, well, like, so wait, this is how I have to be, like, if I'm gonna identify like this? Like, I don't know, like, it's like, there's not one way to be a gay person, but the movie is, like, showing it, like, as if, like, well, yes, because not only that, the straight characters say that, but also the gay characters, like, operate that way. So I think there's something troubling in that. I don't know, again, this movie is just, like, it's so shoddily put together, or like in terms like from an editing and like shot perspective, that like it's like none of the gags really have any kind of momentum, it's or impact, and the performances. There's a lot of energy, but there's not really any kind of like conviction. We were talking about the word conviction beforehand. There's not much conviction, but there's just like a lot of energy in place of that, to the point that it's kind of unsettling. I mean, Cuba Gooding Jr.'s opening dance to "I Feel Good," where he's like doing the worm in his own apartment. I'm like, this is like a lot of energy here.
The worm is in the opening minute of this movie. I'm worried.
It was just so forced, though. That was the thing where I was just like, oh no.
The flop sweat is already there.
Yes.
Sweaty intro.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's another problem with like Van Wilder, where like it is like these characters are like behave so reprehensibly. I mean, like some of the ways in which they're trying to woo women, especially like Horatio Sanz's character, it's like bordering on like assault behavior, where like, you know, he's pretending to be Horatio Sanz is pretending to be someone else and giving like an erotic massage to someone when like the person's operating under the perception that it's someone else. And you know, knowing things about those actors now, like it definitely like colors that. Can't slam the movie at the time because, like, obviously that wasn't something. No, maybe it was not something. It's context like after the fact,
exactly.
like retrospectively.
Well, I didn't.
Looking at it.
I mean, I was halfway through the movie and you told me this, and then I was like, oh no, and like
it's gonna like, color. It's gonna rightfully color things.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly.
But then like not only are they behaving like this, but then the movie like has like a saccharine. Sort of like Van Wilder, where it's like these characters behave so reprehensibly that's like, but then you also, you know, you really want to see them like find love and happiness and everything. And it's like, nope, they don't deserve it. Like they have these women have every right to hate them and everything. But then like the movie, like we were talking about, like the movie has like a very low opinion of women's intelligence and standards and everything. So it's a pretty putrid movie. And like Van Wilder, I found it pretty interminable and laugh free. Although there are moments that are just like so insane that like I just like had to like pause the movie and like write down what was happening because I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. But it's not good.
Right.
I want to hear Michael's thoughts on this because
it
sounds like he
has.
Here
comes the defense.
Treat our guests with respect. Goodness.
This is a mess. No, I'm done. Okay, so I agree with everything you guys are saying in the sense that it's terrible, it's reprehensible, and it is reflective of a lot of the same things of like gay panic comedies from that time. And we already mentioned I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry, and that is maybe the best parallel for what they actually want to do narrative and tone wise in terms of have your cake and eat it, like, you know, as the easy analogy that's thrown around. But I really do think as a scholar of gay as someone who has seen a lot of these, I really do think it stands out in a way that its sloppiness and attempts at humor scan as something else. Now, I'd like to give like a little bit of context there because it's been kind of fascinating to go to some of these films the first time. So in Van Wilder, I have this weird nostalgia, this stale, moldy, decrepit nostalgia. This I don't have nostalgia with. So like for the first 20-ish minutes, 20, 30 minutes, like I was like, is this like secretly ironic? And like just the fact that I went there, I realize is insane. But I think there is something to be said for the fact that like how big and broad this sometimes feels like a completely failed caricature in the way something like But I'm a Cheerleader or John Waters stuff would do. I am not saying the directors or writers even begin to understand John Waters, but I think Boat Trip retrospectively, when you watch some of those scenes, they do play not as subversion, but like, oh, they totally failed what they were trying to hit. So like the lazy toxicity that just emanates from something like Van Wilder this is too weird, even in its laziest beats, for me to view it the same way. So one thing I've been kind of obsessive in talking to Charlie a little bit in the time up to this, because I'd been terrified that I was going to sound like I was trying to reclaim Boat Trip as some kind of progressive film. But anyway, I really do think it's worth, again, talking about reaction shots and the way that Cuba Gooding Jr. and Horatio Sands' character react to being around gay people. It is not comparing it directly to Van Wilder and the, 3 scenes involving homophobia?
Oh, Van Wilder is unspeakably worse within, I agree with you in that.
No, I'm just trying to say it's, I think, 3 scenes that are actively homophobic in a way that involves gay men. Might only be 2, actually, as I think about it. Anyway, though, like, I still think the way that it asserts a societal view of the world by a small degree makes Boat Trip something interesting as an artifact. Gay panic is a word we've been throwing around a lot. So this is going to be step up on my soapbox for 45 seconds. So gay panic is a term that I had seen in, reviews for decades. And I finally started researching a little bit into its history. I kind of understand that a lot of queer people especially are very aware of this because it's something that threatens their very existence. But gay panic is not something, that's a TV trope origin or something. It comes from a legal defense where someone can plead that someone with a different sexual orientation or gender identity, because they felt threatened by that justified violence. And so this is something that I think I was vaguely aware of, but certainly not aware to the point that the United States still has 30 plus states that do not ban this ability to claim gay panic or trans panic. Trans panic is a way smaller number of states, by the way. In a way that even Van Wilder didn't get me to think about, this does require me to negotiate being too anthropological about this film, not only as a bi man, but as someone who can look back on this and find it ridiculous. And so looking at reviews at the time when it first came out is also fascinating. And you don't actually get a good barometer of where people were at, of how much this in any way could seem resonant to a very ignorant straight person. The notion of someone coming out of this film and thinking they understand anything about gay culture because of the subplot with the poker players is crazy. But that is, at least from my research, it's speculation. And it would be a straw man for me to say those people existed. So that's all to say that I'm finding this fascinating on a craft level. In the same way I do find anti-comedy. The scene Brian already mentioned with the banana and the porthole, that is so confusingly edited, so long, has so many bizarre directions. Is that the scene too where she puts her leg up randomly in the middle of the conversation, or is that the fruit
she's
scene?
Just caressing. she first of all peels the banana and it has like a vein in it. Like
Yes.
they found a banana that has like a vein through the central bit. It's so phallic that I swear to God, they just found a banana that was like, what's the most fucking like erect penis looking banana we can have?
Fly it in.
But I've seen that joke, Charlie. I have never seen it that long.
It's very explicit, and here's the thing that I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
It's just the weird thing about it is that it's ultimately, you're right, it's made first, it's at first like, oh, he can't even blow a banana because he's so homophobic.
Yes.
Which could, like, if John Waters directed this thing, and you mentioned John Waters.
I'm not saying this is John Waters. I want to be clear.
But it is identifying with the, oh, I can't do this. We have to have the straight woman do this. And then the joke is on him that he can't contain himself, that he has to fucking come out a window even though he's literally got both arms like extended up. He's not even using a hand to help himself,
It's the
which
best
is confusing
pose.
in its own right.
It's
and then
the
it cuts
best.
to like the horn on the boat blowing like brrr, and it's just like, what? And then but then ultimately what is like,
Wait, what
I
are the
don't
two
find it-
words he says? Is it I'm fine?
That's fine. How is that? That's fine. But the thing is about that joke is it's not Cuba Gooding Jr. at the end of the punchline, and I don't find this offensive. I just find it stupid.
Oh, yeah.
Is that the cum lands on a gay couple, and as we mentioned, one person says, "Oh my God, you could at least kiss me first,"
yeah.
where they're completely clothed, just looking off the side of the boat. So it's not even that the joke ends with Cuba Gooding Jr. being like, "I can't contain myself." It's the fact that a straight man came on a person's face through
Yes.
a window, through wind. And then they're just like, oh, that's typical. Like, I'm sorry. Like, if someone came on my face through the window, I'd be like, what the fuck is the matter? I would
Yes.
be like calling the cops.
I would
you're
have
on
to
a-
think about my reaction. I don't know.
But like
But that's the thing, I guess, that is like, it's not even like ultimately they can't even hold the feet to the fire of the straight people. It still has to end with like a gay joke.
no,
And that's,
you're right.
it's not that it offends me, it's just that it's stupid. You know, like, it's just like, it's not even expected, because you're right, Bryden, you mentioned it. It's not that it's expected. I don't know how anyone could expect that. It's just ultimately...
I've never seen that in a movie before. Yeah.
Ever.
But
ever.
it is just that thing of like, oh, it has to end with this punchline. It can't end with the punchline of Cuba can't resist himself. It has to go back to the gay man, I guess, is my thing.
But it sometimes even suggests a wink, though, in these bizarre scenes that are still extremely problematic. Like one time, Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character gets pinched on the in the ass, on the ass.
It's Horatio
Oh,
Sands
I'm
who gets
sorry.
pinched,
I'm
I
sorry.
think.
And then I can't remember exactly what he retorts with, but then he says, "I didn't think I had to specify." Like, it's just, there's so many weird ad libs and like responses in this movie that I'm not saying justify or like validate it, but this movie feels deeply confused to me on every level. And I think it does kind of go back to what you're saying about it being lame. Like it's that one.
Yeah.
It's so weird because it's such a cruel premise. Like this is just an evil idea for a movie, and it's at every not at every turn, but they're like just repeatedly softening the actual gay jokes.
And what's weird is that, like, just to go back to the joke we were talking about, like, if it was just like, oh, a bird shit on me and then just like flung it off, that would be like even more lame. But the fact that like that's like a minuscule step up, it's just like, it doesn't make it any better. It's still that fucking stupid and that lazy, you know,
but there still is. God, why am I defending Boat Trip so much? But I still really do think there is a difference between how Ryan Reynolds reacts to the two men talking about how they can hold his load, and like Cuba Gooding Jr. and Horatio Sands' character being repeatedly shown the most stereotypically gay things, and they never...
I mean, Cuba Gooding Jr. faints. He faints.
And then when Artie Lang thinks that he's had sex with a man, he is shown in a long, like, extended shot. Like,
Horatio Sands, not Artie Lang.
Oh,
like Macaulay Culkin in Home Alone, like
He's like, oh my gosh, he like tries to wash out his mouth and everything, and then like he thinks, you know, it's like you were talking about how like the movie has no understanding of like sexual identity being fluid and everything, but like he says like, you know, he like thinks he's gay, but then the moment he realizes like he didn't have sex, he's like flooded with relief, and then like runs after like the girl that he wanted to have sex with earlier. It's like just like I don't know. You keep thinking the filmmakers seem like they're thinking, oh yeah, like we're being pretty well-rounded here, but then like they just pull themselves back at like every turn. And I do think it is troublesome how so many of the gay characters in this movie, and also I don't know if this, you know, maybe the whole attitude applies to like how the movie portrays sex. The movie seems to like portray sex in a rather as like something to fear, both with like women and men. Yeah. Whereas like there's the coach who like is like straight up trying to assault like
does assault
everything. Assaults him and everything, and then like there's like the gay men are like, you know, shown like with the butt pinching and everything, where it's like their instincts are just like purely sexual instinct and everything, and like acting like just and like without even like thinking of consent and everything. Like it's like that kind of broad strokes characterization did rub me the wrong way,
like the fact that like any man that crosses their path is like immediately objectifiable and like. Like I wasn't offended by it. It was just lazy stereotyping that like this is what gay men do. Is like, I mean,
but isn't the joke also on Cuba Gooding Jr. and Horatio Sands in quite a few of those scenes?
But it does identify with. I mean, this makes me sound like, because again, I wasn't offended by this movie at all, as I've said 25 times now. It's just ultimately that heterosexuality is the norm.
Yes.
Like it's abnormal to be gay, which
that's
like
true.
I just kept thinking about because he brought up John Waters, and I just keep thinking about one of my favorite lines in
I'm gonna regret that.
is you know, Edith Massey being like, I just wish you were an, I'm just gonna say F slur. The life of heterosexuals is a sick and boring life, and I just kept thinking about that all throughout this movie, where I'm just like, this cruise seems like fun, like, but they look at it as if it's like kind of like a carnival or something that is like a freak show.
Carnival's pretty good.
Carnival-esque, like it's just like everything is a sideshow, like. Oh my god! And then even when you get to the end, I didn't know you were a firefighter. I didn't know you were this. It's just kind of like, it's just like I again, like it's one of those things where I was like, I wasn't offended by this because it's the year 2022 and I'm 31 and I've dealt with enough homophobic gags in my life. But it's like, of course, these stereotypes. That's why I was just bored. Like I was just like, these are just lazy. Which is not to say I'm not trying to shut you down, Michael, at all.
And I'm shut down.
No, that's not.
No. Please continue.
That's all I had to say.
Let's get to the plot real quick. There's not much plot. Jerry, played by Cuba Gooding Jr., and Nick, played by Horatio Sands, are two close friends whose love life has hit rock bottom. Jerry's girlfriend, Felicia, has turned down his marriage proposal after vomiting all over her during a hot air balloon ride during the proposal.
Can I just say I love how nonchalant that she is about being taken on a hot air balloon in the opening credits. She's just like, why? Like as if this is like routine.
The cut from driving the car to the hot air balloon.
Well, yeah, the shorthand of her being like shown as like a bad girlfriend is like she's all involved in putting on her makeup while Cuba Gooding Jr. is driving her to like the proposal, as if like just like the laziest shorthand for showing like this girl is
right. After Nick runs into a friend who is marrying a beautiful younger girl he met on a singles cruise, he decides to take a similar cruise with Jerry.
They know that guy from the cafeteria? Is that what they were saying?
Yeah, the high school cafeteria. I'm thinking like, wait, this is like a guy they're still in contact with. Like 20 years.
So weird.
I have questions.
And this is 2003. They don't like stalk people on the internet at this point. They're just like somehow aware of him.
Right. Right. While on their way to the travel agency, they get into a verbal altercation with a gay man who works at the agency they plan to book the cruise through. The manager, played by Will Ferrell, uncredited, attempts to patch things up by handling their booking personally. To Jerry and Nick, the situation appears to be handled well, and they leave, not expecting anything to go wrong. Haha. After they leave, it is revealed that the agent and manager, both men, are actually gay lovers, and they have booked on a cruise for gay men. During their trip, they come to learn that gay men are less objectionable than they first assumed. However, Jerry falls in love with the cruise's dance instructor, Gabriella, and in order to win her over, he pretends to be gay so he can get closer to her. Bulletproof.
One thing I also want to mention, I haven't seen every episode of Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but I thought of like a gag that they did later, because there's a line that Nick has where he's talking about like, well, like he thinks like it's a bulletproof plan to go on a cruise to find women, because he's like, well, where are they gonna go? And
Because
there's like, that's literally a gag, and and that's like the Always Sunny in Philadelphia, the implication bit, which like that show like really tries to address like the darkness of like those characters.
Yes.
Like,
because of the
impulses and everything.
implication.
Yeah, which this movie does not even get close to that kind of level of darkness, and in a way that makes it more disturbing in this, because it's just like kind of on the fringes,
Right.
shrugged off. But
in order to win her over, Blow pretends to be gay. Meanwhile, Nick blossoms a romance with a bikini model named Inga after an accidental affair with her mean, sex-obsessed coach Sonia, played by Lynn Shay of all people.
We need to talk about how also the models end up on the boat. And
Right.
Artie Lang, or no, Artie Lang. Sorry, I keep mixing them up. Horatio
this
Sands.
was amazing. Okay, this gag.
Yes.
Horatio Sands is like,
Never mind, this movie's
horrified
good
that
again.
he's on a gay cruise. Yeah, and he decides, and he hears a helicopter above, and he says like, help, help, and then he grabs the flare gun on the boat and then shoots it off, and you hear off screen like it hit something.
It's like
They
a
couldn't
Foley
afford the
effect.
budget to have anything sinking or getting caught on fire.
Yeah, and then he's just sort of realizes, oh, and then he runs off, and like the movie halts on the scene a little bit, but then like you cut to like the captain of the boat, who's played by Bob Gunton, a rather esteemed character actor who's been in like a ton of stuff, like Matewan, the John Sayles movie, but he like notices like a bunch of like female, like women, a bunch of women out in the lifeboat, and they're brought aboard, and that's how the swimsuit models from Sweden all like.
It's such a relief that we were picked up by a bunch, both full of homo boys, I believe is the line that they say.
Come on.
Probably.
Like, I laughed because I was just like, oh my god, I can't believe that was an actual line. Look, I was able to laugh at that as a gay man. I mean, come on.
That's before Cuba Gooding Jr. later says, I might turn into a raging heterosexual, which we haven't talked about. You know what? I keep going in plot.
It's just a little end here. In the end, Jerry ends up with Gabriella even after Felicia comes back, and it's just like, sorry, we can still get married. But then he's like, no, sorry. While Nick loses out on Inga, but sees a potential relationship with her sister instead. However, he is then unwittingly and unwillingly reunited with Sonia, much to his disgust and her instant arousal upon seeing him.
Yeah, there's something else too. The weird thing too that's with the Rosalind Sanchez character, the dance instructor, she's like just been going on cruises where she avoids men, like heterosexual men and everything. But like, it's just kind of like a weird thing. It's weird too that she goes on like she's shown on a lesbian cruise at the end of the movie, as if like, and look I'm not saying like it's just kind of like a weird like thing. It's like I don't know how bulletproof like the plan is. Like I'm just like I don't know. It's just kind of like a weird thing. Like I don't entirely understand the logic of like this thing.
It's equal opportunity sex crazed, apparently.
Yeah, I hope I'm not.
What I'm assuming happened is that heteronormative guys or heterosexual cis males who wrote this movie were like, well, what would her next step be? To go on a cruise with no men whatsoever, and especially gay women who But then, even as I'm saying that, I'm like, well, then she'll just be with like by this movie's logic, then she'll just be like in
harassed
a situation where she'll be harassed. Exactly. So even that doesn't make any sense because not by real movies, like not by real world standards, by this movie's standards about what cruises are, that is what would happen.
It is called cruising, Charlie.
I like that William Friedkin film. That's a good movie.
No, it's a.
I know what you're saying.
No, let me spell it out for you, Charlie. Okay, there's also a Chariots of Fire cover because they couldn't afford the real Chariots.
Yeah, it's I was thinking, is that actually Evangelist? And I'm like, no, it's not. But they're trying to imitate it totally. When like the girls are running in slow motion, and then like Nick and Jerry imagine that they're running with them, but then like I think it cuts back to them just like having a fantasy. It's
bad.
Yeah, and the movie also like feeds into like weird stereotypes where like it shows as like it's weird because the movie shows that it's a reality and everything. Like the women are all like topless while doing jumping jacks in their room.
Why does that scene exist? It exists for no reason.
I'm pretty sure that's also in Girls Gone Wild.
Yeah, like it literally seems like this is like it's like I'm thinking now of like the Freaks and Geeks episode where like I think Martin Starr's character says like, so like when girls are like changing in a locker room and the fire alarm goes off, do you think they all run out with their clothes on, or do you think they just run out naked? And then like I think John Vince is like, I don't know, Bill, why would you ask me that? This seems like a 13-year-old would come up with this. He's like, yeah, so women they do this together when we're not around. Like it's so stupid.
Oh man.
Oh man.
Yeah, I mean it's so stupid, and like Charlie, you already intimated about the lack of fluidity in this movie, but it's like fascinatingly incoherent. Like we already said Horatio Sands' character believes you can be turned gay because he believes he was raped by the attractive guy and.
Well, no, I mean, like...
Does he say it's rape, or does he say it was, like, a drunken fling? Because they both, like, are shown consuming, like, a lot of...
Yeah, I mean, it's a drunken fling, but it does seem like Horatio Sands is far more drunk than...
Sure. No. And I'm not, like... I just wasn't sure. I couldn't remember if, like, the movie said the word as, like, when he's, like... horrified.
I also think
they just wake up and then he runs out.
He's
and
not
then,
really
yeah.
horrified and
no, it's less judgmental than you expect. The morning after, it's more like he's like, is it Jerry? Yeah, that's his name.
Jerry.
Yep. Yeah. He's like, Jerry, I had sex with a man. Like it's just like it doesn't play like the usual gross out stuff. That doesn't mean it's good. I'm not saying that, but I'm still think there is something so strange in how this movie understands sexuality that I can't even take it at face value.
It understands sexuality in a very black and white situation where bisexuality, but at the same time, even like good. I mean, like. I haven't even seen all of this show, but I know that like certain shows like 30 Rock were making jokes about bisexuality. Sex and the City was making jokes about bisexuality. Look, this might be more open than I would.
Gilmore Girls.
I played the bi card in high school. It was like, I like both. And then even telling my mom, and my mom was like, I don't think that exists. And then like she would be horrified if I ever, mention that to her again, which I never will. Hope she never listens to this podcast. Sorry, Mom. But there was there was something about that, like, I think about, like, weirdly, I think about Bjork's comments about bisexuality, where she's like, it's like, tasting vanilla and chocolate. You could like both. Like, shut up. But
it's like matter of fact.
Yeah, we weren't having that conversation back then. Pop culture,
no.
Movies especially weren't having that conversation back then. And in those black and white terms, like, is what Horatio Sands deals with more digestible than what most sex comedies would deal with? Yes. it ultimately sides with heterosexuality, which I don't want to like ever say.
Oh, heterosexuality is pretty bad.
No, I mean, what did I say on the last episode? I don't remember. But like, it's just it exists in that kind of universe where we weren't talking about, you know, the, as you said, Michael, the fluidity and I'm sorry, I'm gonna go on this tangent for a sec, but like, I know I said heterosexuality is gross. There are certain movies that I love by, like, I find Brian De Palma completely different type of filmmaker, but I just screened Femme Fatale at the theater I work at for a birthday screening, and there are like
a very queer film.
It's so queer and yet so male gazy. I'm not saying that any film that has the male gaze is bad.
Mm-hmm.
It is often harmful, but
it's just about negotiating it.
It's about context and negotiating, where Femme Fatale is so clearly made by a horny straight dude, and yet there are even unintentional queer-coded stuff in there about how, you know, I'm not going to get into the movie, but Rebecca Romijn just taking on multiple identities and multiple, like, sexual partners in a film made by Brian De Palma, of all people, who's a horny straight man, that I'm just like, I respond to that. And then there's stuff like this, which...
Okay, guys, I walked away for 5 minutes, and I was like, oh, what are we talking about? I was like, of course Charlie's talking about Femme Fatale. Okay, please continue.
It's not in any way equivocal to Boat Trip. I'm just saying, like, Femme Fatale came out in 2002. This came out a year later. It's not even aiming for the same stuff, but I'm just saying, like, I'm not saying, like...
But it is the act of performing broad ideas, in the sense that Rebecca Romijn...
Yes!
I'm not saying Boat Trip's smart about this. I'm not saying but incidentally...
But you're right in that Boat Trip is about characters performing and Femme Fatale is about someone performing.
Sure.
They are not the same type of movies. I'm not trying to say one is equivocal to the other. I'm just saying they're clearly both made by straight dudes. Oh, no, I'm also
oh my god. Oh god. Snydel is canceled party is going on.
I'm just saying that, like, in this time period, you could still do something weirdly productive or even queer with the male gaze.
Yeah.
That is, like, why I think the context of knowing, not having watched this film ever, and knowing that this came after, you know, this was in 2003, that, like, I'm not saying, like, you can't be a straight man and not make something that doesn't respond to queer audiences or has an aura of queerness.
Yeah.
And then obviously this movie is just aiming for dumb, like, sight gags and stuff like that, but ultimately it's just nothing. I don't know. I feel like I just derailed this whole podcast. No. I'm sorry.
Okay, but why is the line, it's not a bi cruise, it's a gay cruise, in this movie, if this movie does not believe bisexuality exists?
That is something that is... You messaged me.
I win.
No, but you're right. Like, I never would have expected that. But then it's like, well, are we really gonna give, like, extra credit? Like,
yeah, I completely forgot about this detail because it's like a throwaway gag and everything, I guess. But there is the scene where, like, when Felicia goes on the boat and, like, thinks that, like, her ex-fiance Jerry is gay or whatever, and, like, she, like, starts reminiscing about, like, oh, you know, there was a time in college and everything when I experimented and everything, but it's like again, like, flirting with the idea of bisexuality, but, like, as a gag.
But the bartender isn't reacting, which I thought was really cool, because any other thing it'd be like the bartender being like, ooh, like, that doesn't play on a podcast, but
right.
But, like, it's not the gawking.
No,
what am I doing right now?
What am I doing? But I will also say the one other thing that I will try to, I hope you agree with this or think this is a point, Michael, into what you were trying to say, is that even when Cuba is in drag, he does look fucking good. I mean, like,
He's having a good time.
Forgot about that fucking scene.
He's having a good time in that scene.
It's not gawking him.
No.
Drag. It's not being mean to the fact like, oh, he's in women's clothing or anything like that.
It's the birdcage-esque until the cocksucker.
He
line.
does look good. I'm not saying that this makes the movie good or that scene is good.
Yeah,
I'm just saying that like the camera. I mean, we were talking about cinematography. The camera doesn't. I don't know if the camera is gawking at him, and I think it sucks if it is, because the one thing I will say that I walked away from that scene is like, yeah, he looks fucking good in drag. I just hope that the movie isn't making fun of him, because everything else about this movie is kind of mocking gay culture as just like
as existent. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's maybe speaks to the movie's low opinion of women that like the Vivica A. Fox character is the one who like uses like so many like awful insults about like calling him tutti frutti, cocksucker, and then also like having like, you know, like literally slipping when like she sees two men in the foreground holding hands and everything. And I think also maybe showing the movie's like showing where it's like sympathies don't lie with women or misogynistic is like having gay characters would be misogynistic to Vivica A. Fox. I think one of the gay captains or the captains on the gay cruise, not sure if he's coded as gay, but he calls her a bitch. And then also even when Horatio Sands thinks that he's like, you know, he's like sort of transcended, like he's like, you know, his identity's become more fluid, you know, like possibly, you know, gay. He says like, I mean, he's like talking to the guy that he thinks he hooked up with. It says like, man, like, you know, can we just be friends? And then like he says like, oh man, if I said this to a chick, she'd be a mess right now. So even when the movie thinks it's being progressive, it's falling back on like all these regressive ideas before it falls into its regressive ideas about sexuality.
Even when the wedding is ruined, Vivica A. Fox says, "My dad's gonna kill you."
Yeah.
As if like she
Richard
has no
Roundtree.
Power. Yeah, like
that's wild that he's in this movie.
Richard Roundtree as her father, but even like she only has, which you're right, Bryden. Like that was the thing that like kind of boggled my mind is that like, oh, they're making the woman who's like threatened by men potentially being attracted to men even more homophobic than like...
So therefore
yeah, and also the fact that like part of her unappealing personality is, I forgot about this too, but like she's like taking control of like all the wedding stuff and everything, and like having control of like all the stuff in his life. So it's like showing the work, like just like the again regressive stereotype,
a masculine,
like, you know, there's nothing scared of like, a controlling woman. Yeah, totally.
We have any? Let's just do final thoughts. Still have really nothing to say about boat trip. Bryden.
Yeah, I thought this was aside from like the occasional gag that was like just like so bizarre and like that it kind of like did make me just sort of like laugh out of like bafflement. I found this pretty interminable, and look, I don't think this movie's harmful and everything, but like I think it is like one of those movies that is like definitely even as it's like trying to seem progressive and everything, or like it's like regressive mostly in its humor regarding sexuality and women, and I think it's a movie that deserves to be forgotten, but it was fun talking about it with all of you and getting some possibly new perspectives on it, so thank you for
that. Charlie,
to get to what both Michael and Bryden were getting at, like it's not as regressive as you would think towards like queer people so much as it is about regressive about women and their responses to queer people, as if men are the only people to have these types of thoughts and fears, and then like their thoughts and fears could be resolved through stereotypes, but women weirdly can't. Like it's just that it's that weird thing where it's just like women can only view men as fruity tooties, or you know, like men masquerading. Tutti
Fruities.
Oh,
Little Richard didn't
queer,
write a
you
song
have every
called
right
Tutti
to fucking correct me.
Thank you.
By all means. Tutti Fruities. Like I guess that's the thing that did stick out to me most, and like it's like again, like, I don't think this is offensive in any way. It probably was in 2003 when, as an openly gay man, like, in 2022, like, obviously I have more, safety nets than people did back then. It ultimately was just, like, this thing is, like, a weird kind of, like, making everything other than male heteronormativity carnivalesque, I guess, is just kind of the thing, which I kind of expected, and it's just kind of like, okay, whatever. Like,
yeah, it like fails as a comedy and also fails later on to not even be like, wow, that aged poorly. It's like it doesn't even get a reaction enough to be like, oh man, we've really got to, this really is saying much. It's like it just exists and it's bad, and it doesn't even have enough thought behind its cruelty. Like that's the worst thing I can say about it. It's just it doesn't even try. Michael, send us out.
Yeah, I mean, as we talk about it more and more, I already had such qualifications for the things that I found interesting about this, and I still think it's a more interesting artifact than Van Wilder.
I will agree
That's
with
what
you
I
on
will
that.
say.
100%.
I don't know. I had a relatively okay time with the watch. Like it moved for me relatively, but I think it was the fascination with what could happen. So I think that's why I am not like hammering home on the lazy stuff as much, because this confused me constantly. So it's not even like
it's a time capsule.
Like every Van Wilder joke. Yeah. It's bad. It probably should be forgotten. I don't know. I think it was weird. I've just been talking to people online about, like, especially trying to look back at gay panic movies and what people remember. And this was one people brought up a lot. It's hard to say whether there is any value in going back to this stuff. And, that was, full disclosure, like, my main reason I wanted to, like, come on here, because I would never talk about good movies. Gross.
Yeah,
it was this or horror, so we always knew it was going to be one of the two. Yeah, and, like, looking back at it, I feel like if I had any clarity about it, it's still incomplete, because I really don't know what the world was back in 2003, right? 2003?
Yeah.
It's easy for me to look at reviews that were like, this is super offensive and broad and everything. I don't know what the average person thought. But I do also know this is a long history of things that have been destructive to societal understandings of queerness, gay people, etc. So yeah, I guess my long winding thing to that is the longer we talk about it, the things that I thought made it vaguely unique, there's too many other things that invalidate those bits to truly, distinguish it from the other toxic wasteland dump debris. I don't know. It's not a good movie.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it more than I expected.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I honestly think that, even though you enjoyed it more than me, I think there is like time capsule quality to examining certain things like this that deserve to be treated in said way, as opposed to, like, just examining it from our contemporary point of view. That's just boring.
It's just hard to get a sense of whether it's an actual barometer. Even something like I now pronounce you Chuck and Larry, which is 7 years later, is still peddling the same thing. And then you even have something like Philadelphia. Is Philadelphia
93?
93?
Yep, 93.
So, like, when it comes to those mainstream queer films, it's really hard to now watch them and try to get a sense of whether they're any barometer of something. Like, on some level, it does feel a lot less productive than, you know, for instance, if I would have watched like Arthur Bresson's, Bresson, I think is how you pronounce that, like Parting Glances, and yeah, you know, like those other things that we're really trying to push things forward.
Yeah.
I don't know where that leaves me, but I'm not going to watch Van Wilder again.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Almost Major. Please rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes. Please follow the pod on Twitter at Almost Major to keep up to date with what movies we will be covering in the future. Myself, I can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at Kev Bonesy. Bryden can be found on Twitter at Bryden Doyle and on Letterboxd at J Doyle. Charlie can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at CT Nash91. Once again, thank you for listening.